The Dragon and the Twilight Princess. Eliell was of two worlds split down the middle. One for the light of the world, the beauty of flower fields and crystal-clear mirror pools. The other was for the starry, night skies and blue moon kisses, touching the shades of black in the shadowy crevices. She was a princess of the twilight forest on the edge of the world, born of royalty. Her days were spent in the courts, dancing to the everyday tune of fairy talk, courting the noble seers and their every prediction of human fears and greed. She was trapped in a world of talking heads. When it came time to do her duty as the daughter of royalty, she would fly out to meet the dawning sun and sing with the rest of her kindred. The stability of all things was magically sung to the balance of the fae. At night, though, Eliell was always on the move, out of the palace and dancing on the water's edge, kissing the seas and the soft white foam. Above, she would sing her song to the blue moon. In the world of night and mystery, she would fly and enter the dark forests holding their secret talks of dryads. She would enter the ancient groves and the older side of the fae. Here, she wandered to and fro underneath the wise oak and his caretakers, the crooked and thin spirit nymphs in the hollows of the tree. They normally never spoke to her, their minds lost in the age of the tree. But they watched with keen eyes and gave way to her dancing moon-kissed sparkling feet. She would set her sights on the mountain peaks to the east, to the island of dragon kings. In every legend told, there was a dragon who lived alone for the good of the Twilight realm. He was different in every way and had a love for unnatural things. The Fae was a realm of order, to keep and curate the world of magical beings. He was a dreamer of other things, questioning the order of the Fae. Each night, Eliell would climb the tallest hill deep in the oldest part of the forest. There, she would stare out at the mountain island and wonder what it would be like to be a dragon king. Fergenol curled himself on the tallest peak of the tallest mountain. Here, he gazed out at the world around him. He was alone in the world with his imaginations, so unlike the other beings. His tribe had long since cast him aside as he didn't fit their ways. They were the lords of the Fae who ruled with authority. He was of a different breed, odd in his thinking and dangerous to the way of the Fae. Finding no friend to console in, Fergenol flew away, as far as he could fly till he landed on the peaks of the Dragon King's island. Its mysterious powers drew him to the depths where the Dragonblood kings were laid to rest. Their ancestral tombs became his home, of which he had many conversations with the dead. High on the white peaks, he would dream the things forbidden to the Fae, human things. Why did he think these dreams? The order of the world was for him to live and fly, to greet the heavens with mighty wings and cries. He was a guardian of old, a lord of the mountains and the skies. To dream of human things, to imagine the world anew, who was he to disturb the order and mysteries of the age? So alone he sat, year after year. He was isolated from all magical beings, to dwell on the impossible things, the world of humans, and the ancient cosmic tone. Nobody understood him, his need to dream. Was he to be cursed to wander the Fae alone? At last, he spread his wings wide and soared to the heavens. The clouds became his blanket to hide from the eyes of fairies and unicorns, from the water nymphs and the dryads of old. He soared higher till he was at the brink of heaven's stars, where he felt most welcome. For here it was that he was split. The world below was the Fae, and above the heavenly beings, starlight and black, the mysteries of the cosmic played. With a long shuddering breath, he roared out his pain and frustration till at last he had no more. He soared for hours then, lost in dreams and lost in thoughts that never belonged in the Fae. Each day and night drained a little more out of Eliell. Her once playful nature was beginning to weigh thin. She now had to pretend at court functions. She stumbled her way through meaningless talks of courtiers of other fairy realms who would mingle with her kind during festive eves before greeting a new cycle of the twin suns. One day, with her being in the course of things to greet the new dawn, she groaned, tired of all the day-to-day rituals that never ended. They never changed. She wanted more out of life than this. Unknown to her, someone watched her. Following the procession of singers out of the palace, Eliell made her way up a long grassy hill to where several open pillars stood. Each of the fairies joined hands inside the pillars and began singing. For Eliell, she sang with the rest, but her heart had no spirit for the words left. Her tone had fallen short and off. Lowering her head, she whispered desperately to the cosmic maker, "Why am I different than all the others? Will you answer my burning desires?" I feel as though I am being turned away and shunned. My nightly flights have given me pangs of longing I do not understand. I dream of the night more than the day. I am different. I am broken and afraid the others see. Please answer me. That night on her way to her bedchambers, Eliell heard whispers. Following the sounds, she peered around a corner into a hall reserved for the High Council. Standing nearby, two council seers spoke with one another. Their words were law in the eyes of the palace. She's a danger to the order. One said with anger in his eyes. She's unnatural, breaking the cycle of the sun. I saw her halt and corrupt the song. She will sabotage our traditions and the created order we have established. Royalty or not, she must not be allowed to sing again. What do you suppose we do then? She is after all of royal blood. We will speak to the king and queen. They will know what to do about their daughter. And if they don't? There was a glint of something wrong in the second seer's eyes as he replied. I've seen things, my friend. The eye has seen, and we will do what must be done. Eliell's heart sank as it had never done before. She felt like a dagger had been shoved into her chest. With tears in her eyes, she fled the palace. She flew into the forests with reckless speed, not caring as the limbs cut into her wings. She was truly alone now. She was a stain on everything touched. In the darkest part of the night, between twilight and daylight, a meadow field was awash in gleaming splendor. A pool at the center of the field glistened with fountain light to capture the essence of the moon. An ancient tree of white grew taller than most here. Its roots were deep within the ground beneath the water's depth. With limp fingers, it stretched out and up with ancient hands to capture moonlight. Entering the meadow, Eliell was startled and stopped short. There at the edge of the pool sat a man. His garments were black and red, his hair white and flowing. His features were one of the ancient kings of legend. But what would a human be doing in the heart of her people? How had he not alerted the high guards or even the Twilight forest itself? Cautiously, she approached a nearby tree. There, she stared long and hard at this intruding man, a forbidden thing. It was for the fairy to bring order, and man was the opposite of that thing. To even dwell on a human risked being cursed. She couldn't help it. Eliell's nature was to dwell on the stranger things. Decided, she raised a hand to heaven before touching her face. Instantly, her wings disappeared, as did all other features of a fairy. Dressed in blue and black garments to match the night sky, she walked towards the moonlit pool with her garments flowing as though the winds were carrying her. The man never heard her approach. Pausing a few feet away, she wondered what she was supposed to do. At last, the man turned his head slightly and said, "The world is beautiful at night, is it not?" Eliell blinked in startlement. She stammered, trying to find words to say. "It is, but how did you know I was here?" The man laughed, but his tone was gentle. He stretched out a hand. "Come, sit with me under the fairy tree." Eliell hesitated only slightly before taking the hand, and sat on the bank of the blue watery pool. At length, the man leaned back and looked into the starry sky. He turned to watch Eliell do the same. "Who are you?" he asked. "You wear the colors of the night, but of cloth so fine you float on the winds. I feel I know you, but my wanderings have only been alone." Eliell felt her heart beat hard. She was alone with a man, a human man. "I would ask a question of you first. How have you managed to come to this place? It is fortified and guarded by magical sentries. The realm is far from human lands." The man laughed and looked deep into Eliell's eyes. "I see you have broken your own laws." He smiled mischievously and turned his gaze back to the heavens. "The princess of the Fae is a Twilight princess indeed." Eliell quickly scooted back, her eyes wide in shock. She scrambled to her feet and backed even further away from the man. "Who are you to know anything of me? You are no human. Why play the guise with me?" The man shook his head sadly now. "It is not I who was trying to disguise, princess. I have taken this form as it suits me. You have done so out of pretending. Are you ashamed of your wings then?" He looked at her wonderingly. "Go back to your people where you belong." Something in the man's words caught Eliell off guard. Did she detect pain in his voice? Slowly, she took a few steps towards the figure again, and looked with fairy's sight. "Who are you that you are in pain in such a place like this?" But the fairy's sight came back with nothing. There was powerful magic surrounding the pretend human. The man laughed softly. "Why would a fairy care of such things? You only play in the sunlight with mischief and laughter. What do you know of the true nature of things?" Eliell lowered her head as fresh grief stabbed at her. In a soft, choking voice, she whispered, "I don't have a home to go back to anymore. The man's attempt at frightening the girl died instantly. He stared at her long and hard. In a neutral tone he asked, "How is that possible?" A single tear found its way down her cheek. "I am different than everyone else. I see things they refuse to. I am now seen as a danger to their way of life." The man stared at her unblinkingly. Slowly, his eyes softened and wandered over her twilight blue and black gown. The wind had picked up slightly and the cloth pressed against her flapping like sails. When his eyes returned to her own, he whispered in startled amazement, "You are unique. But you are not a danger." He looked down for a second to the lapping water at his feet. "You are like me." The sound in his voice was that of someone in shock. He looked back at the princess, eyes wide, but no words could come. Instead, he slowly got to his feet. Still staring at her, he stepped away several feet. With a sudden intake of breath, the man lifted his head to the heavens. In a flash of light, the man disappeared, and in his stead stood a dragon of red color. His eyes glowed yellow as scales stretched down his form. His head was framed with many horns indicating his age was great. He also sported white hair below his mouth. Eliell stifled a shock, her eyes going wide. You are the dragon on the island. You are the legend warned of." Fergenol gave a crooked grin. "I am warned of, huh? Is it to be shunned to ask questions of the cosmos and wonder about the deep things? Or are fairies so focused on a single task, they forget there's more to life than what is seen?" Eliell lowered her head at this. With a sweep of her hand, her true nature of a fairy returned. She flapped her wings hard and rose to Fergenol's eyesight. In a deliberate tone, she said, "I'm not afraid. I live for the beauty in all things, even the twilight dark. The mysteries of things are what I love." Her heart pounded as she realized something. In the presence of Fergenol, or bidden by the council, it was in his presence she found herself free. Fergenol looked on Eliell and Eliell stared back, both suddenly enchanted. They realized the same thing at the same moment. Fergenol was the one who lowered his head first. In a dejected whisper, he asked, "What do we do now?" "I am of the mountains. You are of the forest glens." Eliell huffed. "Are you saying I'm frail?" She glared and puffed her chest out. The dragon lifted a single eyebrow. "I'm not." The princess glared back and with that, flew to Fergenol's back. With magic, she fastened a seat for herself with straps and harness. Satisfied, she nodded to herself and returned to look Fergenol in the eyes. "You are bold to think I will carry you." He narrowed his eyes slightly. "We have only allowed such a thing long ago, but not any more. Not after we were betrayed by man." Eliell's face fell for a second, downcast. Looking up, she gently brushed Fergenol's scaly mouth and knelt into him. "Please, take me with you. Take me away from here. We could have adventures. You can show me the heavens and the heights of the world. I will show you the intricate small things and the magic of flowers and the night wisps. Let me show you my world, the way it is meant to be, and you can show me yours." Fergenol lowered his head slightly. In a whisper he asked, "And afterward? When we have explored our two worlds, what then, princess? Will you leave me to find another adventure as fairies do?" Eliell suddenly realized what the dragon was asking. There was a deep pain in him, but was also risking hope. Her heart fluttered as she realized something more. She realized something inside herself. They were a match unlike any other. The shock of it startled her to the core. Could she see herself walking into the unknown? But wasn't this the greatest adventure? To explore the unknown with another? Closing her eyes for a moment, Eliell took a deep sigh. Opening them, she looked at Fergenol and smiled genuinely. "I want this to be an adventure that will last forever, you and me." Fergenol raised his eyes in suspicion. "That is a very long time for either of us. Then let us find out what that adventure looks like. What of your people?" Eliell shrugged. "I have many brothers and sisters. I was never going to be allowed to rule anyway. My place was never important." She looked at Fergenol earnestly. "But with you maybe, perhaps I could find a place in your heart?" Fergenol sniffed and chuckled. "You are indeed unique." He flapped his wings gently. "Come. Let me show you the stars and the in-between where the heavens kiss the world." With a soft squeal of glee, Eliell laughed. Leaping onto the dragon's back, she leaned over and said, "And I will show you the wonders of my world." Transforming herself back to a woman, Eliell fixed herself in the saddle and breathed in excitement. Fergenol lifted from the ground with powerful strokes of his wings, and Eliell felt each muscle beneath her. She smiled broadly now, and together they laughed as one. As each year passed, the bond of dragon and fairy cemented itself in ways they never saw coming. Any time away from each other was a painful experience. They longed for each other's company. Together was home. The thing they had longed for their entire lives had been found in each other. Together they roamed the world and its magical wonders. When this adventure had come to an end, it had been decided between the two of them. Instead of being a dragon and fairy, their need for each other could only be found in one state. Flying halfway around the world, they came to the edge of the Dragonblood realm, home of the great dragon lords. In the valley of the Crystal Lake, near the summit of the mountain palace, they sought out someone almost as old as the mountains themselves. Taking the shape of a man and woman, Fergenol and Eliell walked into the cottage village where it was said the old wise one lived. The houses were all vacant, but the cobblestone walkways were kept clean underneath the many different autumn trees. Birds chirped sweetly in tune with the wind. The scenery was a picture-perfect painting of rightness. To one side of the village, a large waterfall cascaded down the mountain cliff with a distant dull boom. White mist flowed up to form a filmy wall to the rest of the world. At the far end of the cottage houses, the stone road led to an opening to a cave in the mountain. "Are you sure this is the place?" Eliell asked, stopping at the center of the village. She turned around and around, but there was no sign that anyone was home. Fergenol smiled. "I'm sure. I've been here many times before. He is the oldest and wisest of anyone." Nodding, Eliell let her hand fall into Fergenol's, and the two of them walked towards the cave entrance. Nearing the entrance of the cave, they paused, unsure what to do. In the direction of the waterfall, someone called out, "Visitors," followed with a soft chuckle. Presently, an old man with long white hair and a beard approached. He held a very old staff in hand with a strange globe of a world fixed to it. The world inside seemed alive. The old man's eyes were as keen as any young person's with wisdom beyond measure. Waving Fergenol and Eliell to a nearby bench, the old man lowered himself on a nearby stump. His eyes twinkled and his manner was warm and inviting. Smiling, he asked, "Now, what brings the two of you to my humble home?" Fergenol looked to Eliell and she returned the look. Their hands had never unclasped from each other. Each one looked into each other's eyes longingly. "Ah." The old man smiled knowingly. The smile lasted only briefly, however. In its place was a solemn expression. "I think I know why the two of you are here. Are you the one called Shrukin?" Fergenol asked the old man. The old man nodded sagely. "I've been called by many names over the years. That is who I am today, though." Eliell looked on eagerly at the old man. "Do you know who we are then? Why we have come?" Shrukin nodded again, but his expression lost its spark. "The thing you are wanting is not without a price. We will pay you anything," Fergenol said eagerly. He clasped Eliell's hands in his own. Shrukin shook his head slowly. "You do not understand. It is not I who is asking for payment. I do things freely. I am referring to the cost of yourselves." He leveled a finger at the two of them. "I know who you two are. Princess Eliell of the Twilight Forest." He gazed intently at the princess as he said this before turning his gaze on the man. "And you are the dragon, Fergenol of the Far Islands." He nodded again. "I know you both and why you are here." He turned in the direction of the waterfall and stared at it for a time. "Both of you are born of magic, not of mortal flesh. But you seek the one thing that separates you. The ability to be human. To experience the life of choices, mistakes, and all. Your world is that of order with set rules that cannot change. It is the way of the Fae." Both the man and woman lowered their heads, still clasping hands. Shrukin sighed heavily. "I see the love you have for each other." "I do. But I cannot make you human. That alone is reserved for the one who made all things." He paused and scrunched his eyebrows together. "How long have you two held this form today?" Fergenol and Eliell exchanged contemplative glances. "A little over an hour, I think," Fergenol said. Shrukin nodded with understanding. "Then you have but an hour left before you must return to your original form." He leaned back on his stump and closed his eyes. "At length," he said, "there is something I may be able to do." Both Fergenol and Eliell looked on Shrukin with eager hope. "We will do anything," Eliell said quickly. "We cannot hold this form much longer, but it is what we desperately wish for." Shrukin rose a hand to stall her. "I should warn you. What I propose is not without risk to you both. It is irreversible once it's done." Both Eliell and Fergenol nodded again, their eyes locked on Shrukin. Fergenol said, "I will do anything for her if it means we can be together as man and woman longer than a few hours at a time." Shrukin turned to the woman. Are you sure as well? The princess nodded. Fergenol nodded and with his staff in hand got to his feet. Follow me. He had taken them down a winding path into the mountains. From an ancient door they entered the halls inside the great mountain palace of Dragonblood. Enormously tall pillars filled the cavernous chamber halls. They walked for hours deeper and deeper, ascending stairs till at last they came to a cavern of water. It stretched out as far as the eye could see. On the walls glowed bluish-green crystals which cast rays of shaded light across the watery surface. On the banks of the water was a boat. Fergenol stopped short of the water and pointed outward. Do you see the island there? Eliell and Fergenol looked and saw in the distance a glowing white light emanating from the tallest tree they had ever seen. Its trunk was fashioned into an island rock. Go to the tree and once there lay down underneath its glowing leaves. Let the white light fill you. And then? Fergenol asked. His eyes focused on the far island. Then you stay in this realm, Fergenol said softly. You will be able to change back into your old self for a time outside the mountains. He turned to face the two and his face turned grave. But if you go through with this, and you leave this place for longer periods, you will die a mortal death. Both Eliell and Fergenol frowned. Death? They whispered in unison. Fergenol nodded. The price of becoming like a human is to also live under the rules. To be human is to also risk not being perfect. There are always laws to every facet of creation. From the beginning, Anne broke those laws because of their nature. For you, not born of human but magic, the law is to always be tied to something. To experience humanity, you must be tied to this place forever. If you venture from this place without returning to replenish, the natural law demands that you die an eternal death. Both Eliell and Fergenol looked down at their hands. Neither of them had known death. It wasn't a thing to dwell on in the Fae. Eliell whispered, How far can we travel? Will I be able to go back home? Fergenol shook his head sadly. The distance is too far. You would die before you returned. Slowly, Fergenol's eyes fixed on Eliell. He knew time was drawing short and both would have to return to their original form. I cannot ask you to take such a risk just to experience humanity with me. The princess shook her head violently and wrapped herself around Fergenol's neck. Don't say it. She looked into his eyes intently. I found what I longed for and it's you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Heal you, to experience what it means to be human with you. But the risk, can you live without me? Eliell asked, her eyes locked on Fergenol, watching. For a long time, neither of them looked away from each other. Fergenol, at last, lowered his eyes. Kneeling, he lifted his head towards Eliell and clasped her hand in his. To Fergenol he said, My life is hers. I will never find it anywhere else. With tears glistening in her eyes, Eliell knelt next to him and kissed him passionately on the lips. To Fergenol, she whispered, we will be one together as humans and live with the rules set by the Maker. Fergenol nodded sagely. Stepping forward, he raised a hand before them. Then I pronounce you as one with each other, bound together for as long as you two shall live. Fergenol brushed a lingering tear from Eliell and smiled. They rowed the longboat towards the distant island shore, each feeling nervous but excited. As they approached the island, the tree they had seen in the distance now loomed tall and foreboding. Its limbs were massive as the trunk spanned several spans. To walk around the trunk would take a very long time. At the shore, the boat ground to a halt. Leaping out, Fergenol grabbed the rope tied to the boat and dragged it the rest of the way to shore. Reaching a hand out, he carried Eliell over the bow to dry land. She gave a soft giggle and her eyes sparkled mischievously. Turning as one, they faced the enormous tree before them. On the ground lay bright illuminating leaves that faded after several minutes to vanish from sight. Above rained a ray of colors falling from the many branches. Fergenol took Eliell's hands in his own and stared at her longingly. After this, there will be no turning back. Are you sure about this? Eliell gently leaned into him, taking her hands and wrapping them about his waist. With their faces inches from each other, she whispered, I'm sure. She kissed him then deeply, all the while feeling herself lose hold of her human form. Fergenol felt Eliell's shaking fingers, and with strong hands, braced her and walked her the few steps to the base of the tree. Here, he lowered them both to the ground and cradled the princess in his arms, taken aback again by who she was. With glad tears in his eyes, he brushed a strand of human hair from Eliell's face and whispered, I will always love you, forever and always. In a whisper, eyes closed, Eliell replied, always and forever. It is said in old legends that from time to time when glancing into the night sky, one will see a strange sight. As a streaking star falls from the heavens, that same star will hold brilliant wings of light. And if looking closely, a woman of magnificent beauty riding on the back of that dragon star,